Hello class, welcome to week 11 of History of Psych. As always, I have a couple of important announcements and important topics I'd like to go over for this week. All right, as always, I've been starting to get some more questions about extra credit. There are 3 ways to get extra credit for this class. Make sure that you're picking one. If you would want to write a paper about a famous psychologist, that paper is due next week. You always can attend the counseling clinic for sessions as a client, or you can be involved in SONA research. Any of those 3 are options for you. If you have any questions on how to get extra credit for those 3 options, just send me an email. I'm happy to help out and point you in the right direction. Finally, I just want to make sure that you guys are working on your psychological disorder paper. If you want me to review it before you turn it in, if you send it to me by March 28th to my email, I will review it, give you feedback, fill out the rubric for you, give you advice, and then gives you kind of 2 additional weeks to kind of make edits, make any changes. The final due date for that paper will be April 11th. I cannot stress enough to you how beneficial it would be for you guys to turn it in by the 28th and have me review it. I would say your grades will be exponentially better if you kind of go through that review process and don't wait until the last minute. But it's up to you. The paper is going to be due April 11th. All right, when we look towards this week, really the focus of this week is on Gestalt psychology. Very, very different from behavioralism, introspection, psychoanalysis that we've studied in weeks before. This was really kind of a new wave and a new way of thinking about psychology. Right now in history, we are kind of in between the 2 world wars, so about 1920 to about 1940. This chapter is really heavily focused on politics and really how communism as well as Nazism and kind of that development of Nazism really had its effects on psychology. Both communism and Nazism really, with these 2 kind of forces in play in Europe, we get to see a lot of psychologists, a lot of scholars, a lot of professionals leaving Europe and coming to the United States. So really before this time period, most of the psychologists that we were talking about were coming from Europe. We're coming from Western and Eastern Europe. This is really kind of the time period where you start to see more of the focus and more of the ideas coming from the US. And that's really because all the ideas were kind of immigrating to the United States due to communism and Nazism, which I will kind of touch on later. So really the main focus of this chapter is on Gestalt psychology. So kind of to the right of this screen, we kind of see some of the ideas, the theories, the kind of the units and themes of Gestalt psychology. The fundamental assumption of Gestalt psychology is that there are units that form together to make wholes of an individual experience. So it's a kind of a way of thinking about how the world is developed, how we see the world, and Gestalt psychologists really try to label what these laws are and how do individuals see the world, thus creating experiences. But my job really is not for you guys to understand what Gestalt psychology is, like kind of the ins and outs, but kind of understand what was happening in history around the idea of Gestalt psychology. So really in this chapter, as well as kind of this movement of Gestalt psychology, there are 4 big names to know: Max Wertheimer, Kurt Kofta, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Lewin. So all 4 of these people were actually really good friends. They worked together on most things. They worked off of each other, built theories off of each other as well. All of them were born in Europe to German parents, and all of them did end up immigrating to the United States. You really don't hear a whole lot about Gestalt therapists or Gestalt psychologists that much anymore. I will say that the majority of kind of Gestalt principles are used primarily in business, actually. So advertising will definitely use these kind of Gestalt principles in order to create ads, in order to kind of catch people's eyes in advertisement, more so than in psychology today. There is such thing as a Gestalt therapy. I would say it's definitely not used as much as other therapeutic processes and techniques, but it is still out there, and there are definitely Gestalt therapists. A huge kind of focus of this chapter as well is what really happened to Gestalt psychologists, what ended up being their fate, and really what kind of happened to these 4 psychologists that I had just named. So it would really be a mistake for you guys to think that universities in the United States were eager to accept all of these foreign guests to work and stay here. In the 1930s, the United States was going through a tough economic depression. University budgets were being slashed. And just like in Germany, America was having a lot of kind of anti-Semitic worldviews as well. But American private schools, as well as the federal government, were starting to help German scientists escape genocide in Europe. But at the same time, kind of Gestalt psychologists were frequently perceived as arrogant, mostly because of kind of a lack of, there was miscommunication, there was cultural differences, language barriers, that sort of thing. Really, the only one of these 4 that thrived in the United States was Kurt Lewin. And that's just because he was perceived as not necessarily a classic German professor, formal, dry, that sort of thing. But he was viewed as humble, appreciative, approachable on campus. So it really had nothing to do with his work so much as his personality, and that's why he thrived here. So why did all of these very famous, very noteworthy people start leaving Europe? Really, the life and the work of Gestalt psychologists represent, in history of psychology, a telling case of brutal, oppressive government into science and education. During this time period, if you were a scientist, you had to show loyalty to the ruling regime and be of the right ethnic or religious background. So if, let's say, you wanted to be a psychologist in a German school, 1, you would have to be white, have to be. You would have to be Christian, and every day you would have to start every lecture with a Nazi salute and required to take a public oath of loyalty to the Nazi party. Being a scholar, a professional, a psychologist was really not seen as a worthy job. So there was constant kind of public harassment of professors and students. Death threats were very, very common. It's important to note that all 4 of these Gestalt psychologists were able to escape death, and they immigrated to the United States. They were able to continue their work, teach, and have publications in America, but many of their colleagues, their assistants, and graduate students didn't have the money to leave or secure employment abroad. So we can only imagine what else could have been added to their work during this time period. So I know that that was very political, but this is really kind of a chapter and an idea to really focus on. This entire kind of concept came from escaping in a way, and had a huge effect on psychology today and psychology in America. As always, if you guys have any questions or need anything at all, I am happy to help. And I hope you have a great week. Bye.